Welcome to Art is Trauma number 5. This week we did The Unknown Masterpiece by Honoré de Balzac. So, that's my edition at least. Okay, now this was Chris's choice. So, you want to get us started there, Chris?
I think for the first time, spoiler alert, because this story has a traditional turn that I think if you don't read the story first, you don't want to hear it. But we're going to be
You
talking about it.
spoiled when you told me about the story, by the way.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry. I thought I was trying. But we also told you about it like way before we ever did the podcast.
I know, but still, buddy, still. But anyway,
Sorry.
it's fine.
Um, Hopefully it was still a pretty sublime turn.
It was still good. I was still happy with the story, and I'm looking forward to getting to know Balzac better. He's just so overwhelmed with emotions.
So I think that Balzac is characteristic of in Isaiah Berlin's long series of lectures on romanticism. He has a chapter called Unbridled Romanticism. And I mean, here it is. And I think what makes it unbridled is pretty complicated, but not too hard for us to tease out. I mean, obviously the emotional excess is the one that you said. I would also add um sort of everything is subservient to energy. I mean, it's just sort of like palpably caffeinated. I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I can just palpably caffeinated. That's the precise word. So just a little summary for people. This is starts at in 1612. A young painter goes to a artist's house, successful painter, where he meets another painter who happens to be visiting him at the same time. The main character, spoilers, is Nicolas Poisson, for those of you who know your art history, and is a young man. And basically, it's just a conversation about art. And one thing is Poisson. There's really great work that this other visitor of the artist has made, this unknown masterpiece. It's beyond all beauty. So Poisson has his girlfriend, who's also quite beautiful. Is like, well, I bet my real girlfriend's better than your artwork, more or less. And those they have a comparison, and then we'll leave out the final thing until later, the final turn at the end. So anyway, so yeah. In terms of like the in terms of like the content of the story, it's like it's so much like it is just the full. What is it? All the scales are up on the emotions. Every like it's peaking, all of the time.
But
Just like
you're right.
it's great that feeling like with Poison waiting. And like he's just so shy as a young man who does have a real sense that he's an intelligent artist who will be able to make great works, but is also overwhelmed by modesty and by the feeling of impertinence of going to another great painter's house. Like there's an incredibly
Feel that pretty believable, having been in the presence of a lot of really great artists. There is a initial, oh yeah, this is a person. So I thought that was well crafted. I've had experiences where I meet someone and I go, oh yeah, I forgot this is that person, and then you go, okay, all right, let's get on the wavelength.
actually on the terms of that experience, it's kind of like you're meeting an abstraction. Um,
Yeah,
it's like, oh, I didn't know you could meet greatness. I didn't know beauty could walk down the street. That's kind of because when you say like a name like Hauptmann or Chekhov or Tolstoy, it's like those are more like that's a certain way of writing. That's a certain kind of style. That's a certain perceptivity, and like the idea of meeting that kind of person, it's like that's a whole different part of your brain that's being activated when you
yeah,
meet a person who talks and exchanges things with you.
yeah.
Um, so I thought that was quite accurate. Um,
There's so Balzac is associated with realism, like in sort of this birth of I'm sorry, like with naturalism, with being an early proponent of naturalism. And
No,
I
he's
find
not a naturalist. He's not a naturalist. He's
he's
a
a
realist.
realist. Yeah, sorry, a realist.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
Naturalism is that's Emile Zola. That's
oh yeah, we're talking. Sorry, I'm switching my words up. Yeah,
yeah.
so realist, and obviously we're talking psychological realism, and not necessarily. Uh, I don't know. There's certain aspects of this that really fit that insight into psychology, and the development of Poisson, I think, is accurate. You know, in that way. Um, the fact that everything is turned up to 11 makes me feel more that we're just in this like completely fictional grotesque world. You know, it's not really on a cigars, you know, or like
Yeah,
um,
yeah. On a cigar from last week. Yeah, I mean, she has very intense emotions, and in a sense, even that sort of desiccated exhaustion, which
yeah,
characterizes her writing, is like, okay, that's very strong, but it's not just. It's not. I don't even know what would the word would be. It's like it's fantastic. I want to say it's theatrical, but without being fake. It's
yeah. There's a British word that comes up in like the bar scene and in songs, horror show, and
what?
it's not like horror show.
Okay.
It's a British phrase, and I've seen it used to be like, oh, it was that part of the night where everything became a horror show. Like people are drunk, there's excess humanity just lying around everywhere.
That's another good word for Balzac. Excess humanity.
Excess, like you know, I mean, you get the sense that there's not really much divide between the man and the writing. You know, when you read about him,
I mean,
he would get up at midnight to write until 8 a.m.
yeah, I mean, I just love the I mean, just getting to just to Poison what he's like. Yeah, common to all human emotions is a first flowering born of noble enthusiasm, which gradually fades until happiness is no more than a memory and fame merely a lie. Of all our fragile emotions, the one most akin to love is the nascent patient of an artist discovering the exquisite torment of the fame and misery which are to be his lot. A passion brimming with audacity and inhibition, with vague beliefs and inevitable moments of discouragement. Now that's just great. It's like you got a passion brimming with audacity and inhibition, like both. Like I'm bold moving forward, and I'm inhibited. It's
Yeah,
like and brimming with both of that. Like that's a wonderful contradiction. If any budding genius of slender means does not tremble in body and soul when he comes face to face with a master, then he will always be lacking some chord in his heart that you might call it a touch of the brush, some feeling within his work, a certain lyric expression. Again, it's just like that's he does not tremble. Does not he'll be lacking some chord in his heart if he doesn't have that. It's like, well, Balzac certainly got a real harp, like a double-barreled harp, of a heart
yeah.
him.
There's certain lines where you go, "Wow, I really can't imagine a person wrote that." And then there's other lines where you're like, "Okay, wow, Balzac, you're really just sort of free writing in a sense." Like there's a sense where he has the structure and everything's kind of there, and I can articulate this much better. So there's artists who go high class to low class. Like I'm going to write like a really, really profound, deep novel, and by the end of their life, they might be writing pulp, you know, with really good architecture, but sort of going from high to low. Balzac did the opposite. So he's an artist who went low to high. So he started writing, you know, under pseudonyms and pulp and romance novels and, you know, just sort of like, you know, fluff and uh, purple prose, all that sort of stuff. And then gradually, but pretty quickly became moved up. And what I think is really great about Balzac is what survives from that like romance, you know, that lower fiction is the intensity and the speed always of what's going on. I mean, it's like a Michael Bay film
Eh.
But
I'm not.
it's obviously that's a horrible comparison, but there's something left over from the pop fiction that brings it really to that next level for me.
Yeah, he's certainly not pulling punches. Subtlety is not an issue for him. He's overly subtle. He certainly is nuanced. You know, like he does
Oh
have
yeah.
that, but it's like it's just it's okay. So
Well, then to add your thing for the nuance, the the oh my god, what's her name? The girlfriend. She's
Gillette,
great. Gillette's sense of desire is perfectly executed and very subtle. Um, identifying with her in the painting as the object of his desire. And then when he sees the, spoiler alert, she feels that that breaks down the desire because she can't be in the photo for his eye.
mhm.
That's pretty it's pretty nuanced, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's a theme that I've seen. I mean, Zola in a much later novel than this. Sort of talks about what he perceives as a conflict between man and woman, or woman and artist, I guess you could say, of a woman feeling, well, I want to be his center, I want to be his all, but there's this other thing taking him away from me that haunts and possesses and ravishes him. That's not I. Um, which is, I don't know. Maybe there are women like that. Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Balzac. I haven't met a girl who is like, Ray, get away from that dirty math. You know, that hussy is leading you astray.
But
You know,
normally my experience with
actually, I did have one girlfriend. I did have one girlfriend who I got in the mail a thing of
yeah, yeah.
um Max Klinger. And there was a photo. Oh, there it fucking is. I was just like looking through the book,
Yeah.
Max Klinger, and it's like I got to this work right here, and this the tiger, and I was like just like haunted by like oh,
Totem.
just possessed by that way it stares at you. And she was like, Ray, I want you to come back. You're being stolen from me. Um, like there was a certain fear in her reaction.
Well,
So I don't know. Maybe that is a thing that some women feel. The feel.
I mean, I'm sure it is. I mean, most of the time though, I think the normal discourse around this is that the erotic partner uh finds fulfillment in you actualizing your desire, not, like Anna
Yeah,
finds it
that's
fulfillment
the
when I
normal
fulfill the
way.
thing, and
That's the normal thing.
I
That's
find
the
it desirable
succubus.
when, yeah, Anna fulfills their stuff, and there's not like this sense of like, oh, but every time I compose I'm not spending time with my partner. Like what the hell? No, like that's, I mean, maybe, if you're a workaholic, I don't know, maybe, but I think there's something else going on here, which I think is at the time, obviously this is also this 19th century thing. I think there's more of a literal parallel between woman and being art.
Yeah,
Like not being person, but being like literally the work of art.
yeah,
Um, I think Balzac, because he just can't help but imbue every character with a deep sense of humanity, um, moves past that. I just think that every single character in Balzac is so vivid to me. Um, do you think that Gillette is vivid, or maybe not
No,
that much?
I have
Or
to say I don't really believe in Gillette that much. I think it's fine, like the sketch he's made of her, but to me the character that stands out by far the most is the old man, Pfeffen. What was
oh, the
his
painter, Fenhoff.
Fenhoff? Pfeffenhoff, yeah.
Hoffer? Oh my gosh, he's the painter. What's his
He's the painter. He is the unknown master.
Frenhofer.
Frenhofer. Yes, there it is. Frenhofer. Yeah, he's alive. He's present. Like that just description of him walking down the hall with that prominent brow, balding head, fierce green eyes, pointed beard, um, and just that sort of grandiose intensity he has. Um, dreamy visionary
Yeah.
is like, yeah, okay, I believe in this guy. Like he is a character that that's gonna stay with me definitely. Um,
Do you think that Poussin is more of then like closer to an everyman figure?
yeah, yeah, he's closer because, well, I mean, he's the perspective from whom we see the story, and he's also new to this world and these people. Um, he's yeah, so I'd say that about Poison. Um, Now
And for
Poison,
this
he's a
more,
character. Like I do think he's a character. Like that, just that awkward modesty of a genuinely talented youth is reasonably conveyed. His sort of heroicism and desire to defend the chastity of his girlfriend, I thought was a little bit I wasn't really believing that so well. It
yeah,
felt to me a little phony, but
remember the triad? That's the soap opera. So Balzac has a triad. It's not the good, the bad, and the ugly. It was the sublime, the soap opera, and the boring. And I do feel like this one, luckily, I mean, it has nothing boring for me in it, but there were moments where I'm like, okay, all right, okay.
yeah, but
It
yes.
really isn't like as soapy as he gets. I mean, just like really quickly, tiny historical thing. So he was 30 in 1830, like 30 or 31. So he wrote this at like 31. So, kind of like around our age. And right before this, he almost committed suicide and he felt like a failure as a writer. And he also was venturing in all sorts of crap because, of course, he was. But then he literally said to his sister something along the lines of, I have invented something that will make me a genius. And what it was the human comedy. And the human comedy from like the perspective that I studied in my thesis is a very hard work because it's 93 interconnected works. And so this is actually probably the best one to start with in the human comedy because it doesn't have the cast.
Mhm.
It's early and it's still taking in the whole of human life, but I think that this one's a good one to start with because you just don't have to worry about some character entering that is in the middle of their novel that you don't know about.
Yeah, there's no baggage. Um,
Yeah. Which is another big criticism I have of Balzac. Um, not everything needs to be a double unity, where it makes sense in the whole and also makes sense as an individual work. But there's moments where he really does assume that you know who he's talking about.
hmm.
And it makes it
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine with Google, but yeah, that's just an aside, just to give you where we're at. So he's writing on the coattails of just coming up with the human comedy, and the first thing he did that I didn't really like is that he looked at like the work he had done starting in 1828 and just grandfathered it in. It
Mhm.
wasn't like he came up with the human comedy and then started writing. He grandfathered in all these works, and I find most of those works pretty soap opera-y. They're on the so this to me is super transitional because it has some of that soap opera elements, maybe with the defending of the chastity and that sort of melodrama. And yet very clearly the theme is just so far beyond what you could do in a soap. So
Mhm.
just kind of sorry, that was a little background there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's fine. It's good to have like the literary context here. Um, Now, speak. One thing is, now one thing that happened early on is, the artist Fe, Fe, Frenhofer. Frenhofer
Mhm.
basically just tells his the famous artist, like, well, you got some real problems with this work here, and let me tell you about just your problems as an artist in general. And then we are launched into this long speech about how you can't combine Holbein with Veronese. Um, and I liked it. I liked it. I thought that was like a lot of fun. Just I almost want to say just geeking out about painters, and these different points he's making about the linear versus the painterly style. But what do you get out of that that's human? Um,
Well, okay, so I mean, all right, so I find whenever Balzac starts talking about art pretty sus. Um, Suspect in one way, which is that he's always like occasioning a venue for him to insert his own random thoughts. So in this one, it was like, okay, believably the artist. In the second one I have in this volume, Gambara, it's about a a composer. And, it's like he just says a lot of things that most people would say aren't like phenomenologically accurate about music. Like he says something super strange about Beethoven, and then it's like, but clearly Rossini's the great artist of all time, and all these things that we just like at no point, and you're like, oh, like that's just Balzac. And then you read more novels of Balzac, and suddenly it's like Rossini is the greatest artist. Wait, that's just a thing Balzac believes, and he tries to get as many characters as possible to believe it of his own making. It's
damn
just
it, I'm
like
going to win this argument.
with
Uh,
myself and all my troupe of characters, and it becomes a little like farcical. So like when he's describing art, it's fine. I don't it's I mean, I had one thing I really liked was the line where he said, about how there's no straight lines in nature, that kind of old theme, and we have to sort of reconcile with that. But I actually wanted to question you, which is, did you find his observations about all those other artists true to your experience of those artists?
I mean, I'd say that, well, I mean, what he says about them are to an extent cliches. I mean, or that's a little bit unfair. Just common opinion or conventional opinion of like, yeah, yeah, Titian, Veronese are painterly, Holbein and Dürer are linear. I don't. I find it cute the idea of criticizing a painter because he's trying to combine both. Um, it's like, okay, I've never looked at a painter and felt like, damn it, pick a lane, buddy. Um, I've never had that problem or a criticism exactly for that reason, you know. So I found that to be just sort of like, okay, cute. I mean, the thing I will say that I like is the idea of, look, art is not about imitation. Art is not about recreating, basically being photographic. Art is
Yeah.
about conveying the soul of what you're presenting. It doesn't matter if it's in perspective. It doesn't matter if it's anatomically accurate. All that really counts is, are you getting the essence of the thing? And the thing can be flat, or the color is distorted, or the drawing overly simplified or exaggerated. But as long as you get like, no, this is what apples are like, really, on an emotional level, it's like, yeah, then you've created a great work of art. Um, and I liked him making that point. My only thing was he was a little bit verbose about that. Um,
Balzac, a little verbose.
just a tad. I mean, it was still fun. Like I never lost patience with him.
Oh,
Uh,
you will with some other novels.
okay, I'm sure I will, but I just mean in this context, I was. It's like, okay, I'm having fun here, Balzac. I'm delighting in what you're saying.
So
Uh,
I think that I agree with you that it was like a little overly done there. And however bad it is there in Gambara, I mean, it's like 20 to 30 pages. It's almost parody of himself. He describes in narrative detail a whole piece of music. And it's like, I mean, I was like, no, you're not real. Oh my God, he is. And it kind of
well,
reminded me of like, did you just feel like you had to do this because, well, I'm on this ship. I might as well describe the whole piece.
yeah. Well, there's like two. I can think of two other writers who do that sort of thing, and that's J.K. Oisman in Against Nature or Arabar, however you say it, the French. Where he literally has this like a chapter devoted to describing the art of Oberlin Redon and Gustave Moreau, and another chapter talking about his tastes in Latin literature, and another chapter devoted to modern French literature, particularly Verlaine and Rimbaud. Um, and like, okay, that it works in that book. Like, it feels actually appropriate because that's a book about nothing almost. Of just like, oh, look how decadent I am. I'm so up my own ass. It's amazing. Like that's
Yeah.
literally what Against Nature is about. Just this eccentric uh, aristocrat withdrawing to his world of artificiality. So it works there. It works.
Hmm.
We don't have a plot we have to get back to. The other book is American Psycho, which spends after whenever there's a big murder scene, like then we have to spend a long time doing a careful musical analysis of contemporary popular artists like Phil Collins. And
Oh, yeah.
that's fun. Like it's a fun contrast. Kind of got bored with it after a while because it's a trick that gets it's an old that's loses its thrill. Um,
I wonder, I haven't read that book, but I really like the movie.
yeah, and like the movie has a little bit of I haven't only watched little bits and pieces of the movie. But like he does talk about it at a certain point, and like he's basically quoting like that section of the book, where it's like, oh yeah, let's talk about I don't know, Phil Collins or whatever. I forget even the other ones. Um,
But here, when we're doing the art commentary, I don't know. I think that like I sometimes get the notion that Balzac is sacrificing anything he can for entertainment value.
well,
Like there's a sense of like are you not entertained? And you are entertained. I mean, it's grandiose, monstrous subjectivity. And yet there's moments where you go, yeah, that was a little excessive, or pedantic even occasionally.
yeah, yeah, and it does feel a little bit like I wouldn't cut out anything from this story, but I could see cutting things out from this story. Um, as in with Seggers, it repeated itself in a way that was unpleasant. So good story, still a good story, but it was, and here he wasn't repeating himself, but he was off topic a little
Yeah,
bit.
or like here's the melodrama part just for everyone. At that moment, Poussin heard the sound of weeping. It was Gillette, forgotten in a corner. What's the matter, Angel? The young painter said, suddenly becoming a lover again. Kill me, she cried. I'd be vile to love you still. You fill me with contempt. I admire you, yet you horrify me. I love you, and I think I hate you already. Okay. I mean, it's good. Actually, that it's funny. I
Yeah,
thought that was a different moment, but still, it's a little.
yeah, it's such a weird thing. Like I like that. I like that exchange, and it just feels. I really just want to use your word of just like overly caffeinated. Of like, yeah, like it's operatic. It's melodramatic in a way. It's still pleasing and fun, but not fully human. Like I don't feel a tragedy here.
Yeah, and I think I actually want to. I contradicted myself earlier, and I think I want to actually say something more nuanced, which is that um, Balzac's. It seems one of his contradictions in his writing is that on the one hand, there's this human, all too human element of subjectivity. You see the drives pushed to their farthest. You see some characters very believable. Um, but then you do see, I would say, it like subjectivities being sacrificed for the speed of things, or sacrificed for the entertainment value. I'm not really sure. Literary value. What's that? It's that specific flavor of caffeination winds up sacrificing maybe some of the characters' humanity or something. I don't know. Maybe you can say it better.
Yeah, yeah. It feels a bit. Oh God, I really have like. I mean, to me, like the contrast I want to make is with Flaubert. Because Flaubert does, I mean, he takes his time. He's just such an incredibly psychologically subtle writer that there's nothing false. in there. There's no gesture that isn't correct in Madame Bovary. But the thing with Flaubert is that he's very withdrawn from the work. He's a god pruning his fingernails, in the words of Somerset Maugham. While Balzac, his whole heart's in it, but it's a little bit vulgar. Um,
Little.
just a tad. Uh, but let's yeah. So I don't know what else to do with
Well,
that.
no, no. I would say I think that pushing it a little bit further about, I mean, obviously this is your first Balzac, and I've read a lot of Balzac, but I would say that this is characteristic of Balzac in a couple ways. And one of the ways is I think he has a really specific view of subjectivity and how it relates to drive. Like in this character of Fraunhofer, there's a monomania that consumes him. And it's interesting that there's this monomania that consumes him that um, is also reflected in portrayals of Balzac's monomania. Nietzsche said Balzac wrote himself to death, which is, for all intents and purposes, true. I mean, he basically caffeinated himself to death, but he did write himself to death because his doctor said, "You need to stop caffeine. You have a heart murmur," and he said, "I can't because I'm afraid I won't be able to write." So I'm going to use that. But then also, there's a conflict there with the drive taking over, and either you can say that like that's what makes his view of human subjectivity grander, but there's a flip side where sometimes the drive taking over in Balzac makes me feel that human subjectivity is like narrower, that we're all waiting for our monomania to take over.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's right. He's very intense and narrow. I want to say it doesn't. It feels like a man who's totally but only himself. Um, he's not someone who quite. But at least that's my brief impression from this. While someone like like other writers, like in a sense, there's a domain of characters they have. Like Chekhov likes people who are just sort of dead or exhausted towards life, who are these dried out leaves. Um, Maybe you'll have a vulgar character here or there, but that's about it. Someone like I don't know. I'm sorry. Gogol likes his oddballs, his total oddball people, his hoarders and buffoons and jackasses that are just laughably bizarre. And Balzac, but there's sort of more variety in there. But here it just feels like yes, yes, here's a monomaniac. Um, Here's someone who's precisely himself. That was a bit rambling, but it's
No, I think it's good, and I mean, I think it's weird when like not weird. I just find it fascinating. So, did you know that artists have often identified with Fraunhofer? Real artists in reality have identified with Fraunhofer. So the one story that I remembered, and I can pull it up, is so Picasso so identified with the artist Fraunhofer that he rented the real location where the story is set. And you're like, well, this is all silly, right? But then he made Guernica. That's where he painted Guernica, was in Fraunhofer. I mean, quote unquote Fraunhofer's studio.
let's get into the spoiler then of what
Okay, yeah.
we end up discovering is Frenhofer's been working for 7 years, a decade. I'm not exactly sure, but a long time on this one work. Because we get very secretive, and as it turns out, it's a work of abstract art. But he doesn't realize it. He's just been adding so many additions and refinements and layers of color that it's now unrecognizable. But he still sees a beautiful woman there until he's disillusioned by Poisson's remark. But there's nothing there.
I'm gonna read. I think I just want to read it really quick.
Yeah.
It's right here. Okay. So he does a long. You see that breast? Ah, who could fail to worship her on his knees? The flesh throbs. She's about to stand up. Wait a moment. Do you see anything? Poussin whispered to Porbus. No, do you? Nothing. And there's this really great, here is where he's really good at negation because or at least letting things be, because he's not overly describing the fact that they're they're kind of tiptoeing around Frenhopper at this point because, he's kind of gone a little mad. And then the old fraud's pulling our leg, Poussin murmured, returning to face the so-called painting. All I see are colors daubed one on top of the other and contained by a mass of strange lines forming a wall of paint. Which is actually a really interesting description of a painting, right? Like I was
Yes,
like, let's
I'm very much on board
like,
with this. Like, what kind of wall of paint? Are we going Kandinsky, de Kooning, Pollock? Like, let me know here. Um, so like I'm very much on board. But apparent, at least it seems to me that Balzac considers it to be a failure of a work of art. Um, at least that's what I was reading an introduction, which was otherwise stupid, but actually cited, like, that Balzac considered it like this is a symbol of an artist who's, because of his exuberance, has wrecked what would have been an otherwise great work of art. Um,
the modern phrase, gilding the lily.
yes, yes, that's the Shakespearean phrase. Or
Shakespeare?
I could swear. I think as
I
root.
mean, fair enough.
Yeah, I think it's actually it's like a combination of like, who I don't know, it's like who would gild gold and who would perfume the lily, and then we just combine the two, um,
Lovely.
because that's more. Um, but yeah, so, which, by the way, I just feel like, yes, that's a very Balzac thing to do. It's in like to have like so much exuberance and self-involvement and excitement to like you putting too much on here. Like I can
Right. Well,
that,
that's where you're at sort of a bind with Balzac because like his morality is very much 19th century in terms of the drives versus reason, right? Like so his morality he would talk about, like the good side is the side of chastity and reason and the church. He put those two together, which are really interesting to do, but and on the other side you have the world of addiction and monomania and affliction where the drives take over and you lose your reason and you're like, yeah, but you constantly are choosing like there's like that phrase ludonarrative dissonance, which is like when the video game play doesn't match the message of the video game. So there's a certain aspect in Balzac where he's like saying, yeah, like the message is, not to lose oneself. And I'm like, yeah, but the experience is lose myself, lose myself, lose
yeah,
myself.
actually that's a really good connection with ludonarrative dissonance. And for the audience, that's basically like where like you play a war video game and the message of the war video game narratively is, oh, war is evil, war is terrible, but in terms of the gameplay, it's like it was really fun shooting those guys up. I tell you what, I do it again. Uh,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
um, like it's dissonant. Like if you would be consistent, either you think war is great or fun, or narratively, or you'd make the gameplay actually painful and anxiety provoking. Um, or maybe you get judged for like how much you enjoyed killing those people, like in the game Spec Ops: The Line. Um,
That's cool.
but uh, but anyway, but this actually issue is a common theme just in a lot of romantic literature. I don't know if Balzac would quite be under that, but he's certainly in that gestalt broadly. Um, of basically the idea is you have the artist who's presenting like, okay, there's the hero who's the guy we're supposed to be rooting for and is doing good things, but he's kind of stolid and boring and a good boy, and the one we care about is the villain who's has the color and passion and light and just loves being evil so fucking bad.
Yeah,
um
Balzac's Vautrin is, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but he has a villain who's he's a villain and one of the first, I think, if I remember right, gay men in literature, very obviously coded at the time, and he's ha ha ha, I am the evil man, and you're like, yes, let's be evil. Same thing, right? Like, it's
Yeah, like well, like
so
in
it's
like
like these are all sins and bad things, but
they're
so what?
fun,
They're fun.
they're fun, you know.
Yeah.
Like the Templar in Ivanhoe. It's like Ivanhoe, who cares? And he's like sick for like the last half of the novel or something. Like I don't care about him. I like the Templar who's gonna like rape Rebecca and is like tortured by other crimes and like actually has like ambition. Like he wants to do stuff, not just be a good Christian boy. Same thing with like Hugo. It's like I don't care about like the good characters in was it Notre Dame de Paris. Like yeah, okay, Quasimodo, he's touching, but I don't give a shit about the girl, the
Esmeralda.
Esmeralda. It's like oh, she's flat. Like I
It's
want.
funny because in the Disney version, Esmeralda's great.
Oh,
Esmeralda's like the main.
okay. But I mean, she's fine, but she's just kind of flat to me. It's like, but no, it's like I am so behind Claude Fro. I'm so behind the priest. Like, yeah, man, yeah, like pressure her into sleeping with you. Like, go for it. Like, I just he's just so lovably,
Horrible
passionately like.
and passion. Yeah,
It's
I think you're
he's
totally.
alive. He's alive. Like
Yeah.
none of the character is.
So like one wonders when I read Balzac, my initial reaction is to go have a cup of coffee and get to work. And I kind of laugh because I'm like, well, yeah, but like that's not like the message of Frenhofer. Frenhofer would probably be to go ask a friend for criticism or something like something more temperate or whatever. But like what I like about Balzac is he is caffeine. It's not just that it's caffeinated, it's that it whenever I he's one of those writers where just personally I just feel more alive when I read him.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
It's like a
Well, I,
weird
I think
feeling.
that's right. Of one thing is that he's the opposite of Seggers. Of he's not dead to life, and he, like he is absolutely jacked, emotionally speaking. Like he just is. Like life is boiling and twisting and turning in a way that's just great. Like he really just wants things to happen and things to be interesting. It might be garish, some of his coloring, but it's coloring. Um, so like
You
that's
would
what's good about him.
I remember reading you would wear like a dress like frock and dance around Paris in the middle of the night. And I'm like, of course, yeah, of
Yeah,
course
like,
he would.
I don't
And
do that. It's like
also like, but there's a bad side. I mean, a bad side. This is totally irrelevant to ethics, but like he he was always in debt and he was obsessed with finding treasure, which is just sure that fits him. But there is a time where part of the reason why it's thought that he wouldn't go outside during the day was because he owed so many people money that they would find him if he went out in the day. And so I don't know. It's all great. It's fine. But the reason why it's great is because, first of all, the writing's great. I mean, bringing it back a little bit down to why, Stephen King occasionally has caffeinated moments. But, when I read The Stand, I was like, put down the, coffee or cocaine, buddy. But none of it was what I would call like great. It was fine. I mean, he's a good writer, but it wasn't at the level that we're reading here.
yeah, he's Balzac is just a ton of fun. I'm just trying to think of I mean, I know we're spending more time on like harping on problems, but I one sort of issue of like he's not a very sober writer in the sense that here's this guy Frenhofer, and he's like it literally ends like the next day. Porbus returned anxiously to visit Frenhofer and learned that he had died during the night having his paintings, and it's just like okay, like this incredible human tragedy, this probable suicide, or at least death by heartbreak. We're not going to look too closely into that. That's not something we're concerned about. for at least for Balzac. I mean, which is fine. Like maybe it's just a funny story. It's a comedic tone, and we don't want to get into you know raw human tragedy here. But it
I mean,
just
it kind of didn't he kind of miss an opportunity there to
yeah, just like
make an open aphoristic statement or and just like something a little more open and ambiguous about the meaning of the story instead of just like and he died.
yeah.
And I mean that kind of like happens a lot. Like, but I don't want to spoil, since it's obviously the very end. Like, but I would say that like in writers with a completely different psychological tone. Like, I mean, it's kind of a theme. Like, right, like Henry James does that, and it's like you're going and then they died and you're like, oh, okay, well, great. And then I remember when I brought this up when I first started reading 19th century literature to Judith, my mother-in-law, the professor, and she said, well, part of it is it was kind of like that, like, people just died. And I was like, but more, the idea is that like, and we talked further, and it's more like we have such a bigger separation now between like our emotional state and our physical health, I would say. Not always, but like the idea that someone could die of heartbreak, directly is kind of funny, but it happens all the time in Balzac. Someone, he broke my heart and then I just sat there and died. And you're like,
I'm
okay.
okay. I'm okay with death from heartbreak. Like that's a dramatic exaggeration that I'm willing to let to spend my disbelief over in his kind of universe. Other writers, I would be less forgiving, but I think that's a fine thing. It's reasonable, you know.
It shows up actually in a really weird racist context. So there is this book I read just because it was on this press I read called Walkabout, which was an Aboriginal, a story of two white children getting lost in the outback of Australia. And it was written in the 1940s, and it was terrible, of course. And it's like a famous children's book in Australia. So like, there was it at the time it would have viewed itself as humanist, but what was really funny about it is that they meet an Aboriginal boy who's described as from the eternal time and whatever, but that he goes to like give the girl a kiss and she rebuffs his advances, and he sat down, got sick, and died. And and there is this like deeply racist like castration thing, right, where he just is like and dead. And I just laughed out loud because I was like, that's the most stupid thing I've ever read in my life. But sorry. So I mean, even that can be used, and that's not really what we're talking about because that's a 20th century novel that is not canonical in any literary professor's, journal. It's just some stupid thing that happened across my desk. But yeah, basically characters dying because of emotional stimulus alone. Um, I have no idea if people believe that was possible more than they do now, or if it was possible by belief, but or if it just sort of
I'm
was a
just
little.
okay with it. I'm just okay with it. Like I'm happy. Just like I got sad and consumptive and died.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like unbridled romanticism.
yeah,
Your emotional tenure affects your vitality.
yeah. Which I mean, it does have an effect. So let's just this is one of those things I'm willing to play along with. Um, in a modern drama, not so much, but back then,
In a modern drama, it'd be great because you would just be not expecting it at all. It'd be like, no, what?
oh, where's Bill? I don't see him at work today. Oh, he died. Oh, how? His girlfriend left him. Oh, okay. Um,
That also happens in Platonov, if I remember right. But with Platonov, he takes the language of the erotic so far that it becomes disgusting. So, like in Happy Moscow, there's a man who falls in love with a girl and is like, "I will eat your poop. I will eat your poop," and it's like, "Oh God, oh, oh God." It's like it's too late for unbridled romanticism, but it's there. It's sort of this.
what the fuck?
You got to read Platonov at some point.
Okay.
That was definitely not a great sell on
Yeah,
Platonov.
really. Not going for the cocophagia right there, man. Um, I think that's it.
Coprophagia, isn't it? I mean, I don't know why I know that word more.
Oh, not the
Cop-
kind. Okay.
I think
All
hypocrisy. All right, yeah, sorry, go for it.
Yeah, let's not let's try to bring up the level of the conversation just by 20%.
I agree.
Um, um, yeah, I just I don't even know what to do with this thing. Um, I don't know. There's just like stuff that's said that's just to me like this so Balzac. God, like um, I don't know. Like he's just bringing up the idea of like show like was it the Fahrenhof Frenhofer, excuse me, is like, no, like I don't, I'm not gonna show you my painting, exchange, for you to say shame this girl. And he says, there was still love in Frenhofer's plea. He seemed to be flirting with his imitation woman, enjoying and advanced the idea that his virgin's beauty would triumph over that of the real girl. Don't let him go back on his word, cried Porpoise, clapping Poisson on the shoulder. The fruits of love pass quickly. Those of art are immortal. Um, I don't know, just like a comment like that. It's just like, oh yeah, love, that's something that gets thrown away, but art, that is forever.
Kind of
Um,
like a Rick and Morty going, "Don't worry about love, Rick Morty. It's an emotion. It dies fleeting." He does that whole speech
yeah,
about focus on science. You know,
yeah, it's fun.
I
Uh,
think it's fun. I also think that like I would say that a lot of what we can criticize about Balzac are really, really evident things. Like I I mean, you're a mathematician, I'm a music guy, and but we both love literature and we're reading a lot. And I do feel that I feel pretty confident in my criticisms. I don't feel like, oh, this is kind of a subjective criticism. I'm like, no, it's a soap opera at that point. Like I feel pretty confident in where in sort of naming what's going on. Whereas with certain other writers, I think there's more ambiguity, maybe.
yeah,
I don't know if
this
that's the
is
right way to phrase it.
yeah. I'm thinking about this of I guess I guess for me, what was fun about this, I didn't really get that much out of it personally beyond just getting to know Balzac. Um,
Mm.
I like I'm gonna remember. I'm never gonna remember his name, but I'm gonna
And
remember.
offer.
Yeah, fuck, just what is his name? What was it again?
Okay, we got Frenhofer.
Frenhofer, yeah. I'm going to
Yeah.
remember Frenhofer, and I'm even probably going to remember a little bit of Poisson. Those are memorable characters, but like the fun thing is just his intoxication, just that intoxicated exuberance of Balzac, which given most of the literature that I read, which is very sad and faint and ethereal. Like next week is going to be very ethereal with Maeterlinck. Um, People that are just sort of ghosts hanging about. Uh, or even yeah. So this sort of surging vitality is something new to me, or at least something I haven't seen in a while. So I'm very happy to meet that. In
Any
terms
other
of
writers like that? Like a lot of the readers of Balzac are nothing like Balzac. Like William James, Henry James. Yeah, Henry James. Sorry, the whole family was amazing. Henry James. They're actually brothers. William
I
James.
know, no, yeah,
Yeah,
the,
yeah, right.
the,
Yeah, I can't imagine. And then the sister, I forget her name, was also really smart. But Henry James, which we should probably do at some point as well, it reads nothing like this, and he was a great reader of Balzac, and yet there's not that sort of there's great characters and vitality and all that, but there isn't the, I don't know, monstrosity of subjectivity, like the overflowing of life in the way that there is in Balzac. And I can't really think of one that Does it? Maybe he's sort of like, well, the one who did.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of the only comparisons that come to mind are ones that don't quite work. Of Hugo is more refined and restrained in a certain sense, like very intense, but he doesn't feel near he never feels sort of stagey or melodramatic in the way it does with Balzac. I mean, it's endearing the way Balzac is a little melodramatic. With I'm thinking Dostoevsky, but in the sense of Dostoevsky is really intense, like he's shivering with excitement. Um, but it's an excitement of a starving man, grabbing at food almost. It's intensely morbid. Um, well, I haven't actually seen a port. Well, okay, I've seen the statue that Zola, no, Rodin did of Balzac, so I have that image of it. But I just reading this, I could just feel like Balzac is a fat man. There's no doubt about it. Um,
It's like you're like, that is a man who enjoys, just partakes. Now, by the way, he would eat to intimidate. So like he apparently went out. This is again like a total anecdote. You have to check me on it, but apparently went out to dinner with a creditor he was trying to impress to like give him more time, and he ate 4 chickens. Something, there's some-
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh my god. Four.
no, there you go. I don't know. So
um, that, of course, yeah, yeah. Four, just to impress. That's too much to handle. Oh my god. Oh,
well,
uh,
yeah, like so one of his other friends was George Sand, another writer I want to do because of well, another great writer, but like
obviously.
yeah, George Sand, I'll send you she wrote a tribute to Balzac, and it does it. It's like we had a very characteristically strange dinner at Balzac, which consisted of beer, watermelon, and some random other thing. And like, and then it got very late in the night after drinking and talking, and he said, "Oh, I just saw a great statue in the downtown of Paris. Let's go." Of course, this would have been like an 8-hour walk, and he's like, they said no, no, they left, and then she leaves and goes something like, "I know he would have done it. We would have walked there, the whole night through Paris." Like there's sort of this endearing subjectivity in Balzac, which is it is sort of sometimes an excuse for what I wouldn't want other writers to do, maybe. I don't know, to bring it back to the negative a little. Like there's certain aspects in Balzac where there's an eye roll, and not as much of an eye roll in this one. I really think you should try and read the story Gambara at some point, because it's truly bad. But it's weird when these really legendary figures from the history of art are often thought of as untouchable, like you were saying with the artist Frenhofer as being sort of untouchable, whereas Balzac is sort of all touch. I don't know, he's so there. It's kind of, he's almost like it's the human comedy, it's not the celestial comedy, and he's a
Yeah,
character in his
yeah.
own human comedy.
I mean, to me, the antonym of Balzac is Japanese. Um, when I in my mind, because Japanese writers like Akutagawa or Datsai, like they might sympathize with their characters. They might be touched by them, but there is this very strong sense of distance and just feeling of like, yes, this is what human beings do. Those funny things called human beings. But Balzac is no, he's full throatedly a person, and that's refreshing. That's refreshing. to get that.
I
Um,
think that the best compare. I agree with you. I also think that a lot of comparisons. So he has the stereotype as a writer of fiction of a lot of writers of poetry at the time and musicians that don't necessarily become stereotypical of novelists. So, for example, I think that Balzac's brother from another mother is Berlioz. Um,
yeah, yeah, you telling me.
so
I was thinking about him and his biographical details you're mentioning. But go
yeah,
on.
yeah. So Berlioz, there's a story, and this is true, where he found out. I think it was a lover of his was having another lover, and so he got really jealous and dressed up as a woman so that he could have anonymity to go and murder them. But he chickened out of the murder and threw himself into a lake to try and commit suicide and survived. And I just kind of am like, yeah, Balzac would do that. Yeah, like of
Yeah,
course, and I think the thread is unbridled romanticism, this excessiveness in life that um I'm glad other people are going for because it sounds really exhausting for me, but I'm glad there's other people to do that. Like that's not my pleasure. I want to take a bath and have some tea, but there is an aspect of love there for me, of that unbridled sense of potential in life.
yeah. I mean,
Not
it's
to murder your lover, but to just do whatever.
yeah, yeah. In terms of just one way Rand puts romanticism is the desire for life to be interesting. Um, that's was one sort of phrasing she has for it. She has deeper ones, but there are romantics who are much more subtle in a sense of and quieter. Like I think about Terrence Rattigan. He has a story called the or a play called the Browning version, which I think we should do sometime.
Yeah.
Um, and it's basically just sort of this rather kind of quiet, reflective piece about a teacher who's sort of realizing of what did I do with my life? I don't was I teaching the right way all this time? Was I a failure? And it's like it's very quiet and it's extraordinarily heartbreaking. It's I'd probably say it's my favorite play, which is, and I'm not saying that lightly, because it is. So like you can't, and I mean Hawthorne is another example of somebody who's, uh, like he's haunted by guilt, and he doesn't. So you don't have to be a romantic. You don't have to be romantic and muddle-headed, or intoxicated.
Or just irrational. I mean, I Berlin talks about unbridled romanticism as sort of not lasting long because it doesn't like make sense. Is kind of his it's not sustainable as an
Yeah,
art
if
movement.
you're as in it's quixotic. Is that's how he would view it? Of like you have these fits of fervent excitement that are poorly thought out, and then you see the consequences, and then you don't do, and then you are disillusioned thereafter.
Yeah,
Um,
there's also that Johnny Depp phenomenon where in Pirates of the Caribbean 1, Johnny Depp's hot and romantic, but by movie 4 he's just a puffy alcoholic. It's sort of like there's sort of a loss of allure uh
that's also just that's just a
there.
problem of like milking a series and probably having bad writers.
But I
I
think it could happen, and I mean, Balzac going to the doctor itself tarnishes that doctor. Why would you go to the doctor? Just eat 8 chickens. I don't know. I mean, like
just hate.
there's two humans going on, right? There's the human that's really going, oh shit, I'm gonna die of a heart attack, and the other human that's Balzac, in the heavens as this, not the heavens, but I guess more in the streets as this sublime character that is sort of a mask. There's this idea that Berlioz, like with Berlioz's journals, I think in the 20th century we read those, and part of us goes, yeah, that's theater, and part of me also goes, he's kind of constructing it. Like it's not always. honest. Honest may not be the right word, but it's a little bit performative,
Hmm.
which isn't a bad thing. It's fine. It's just, we all have to be performative in our own ways. It's just when it's so excessive, one wonders
Yeah,
how that is.
there are. I mean, you can be dramatic without being over dramatic. Like I don't find, like I think Ibsen, it's very dramatic what he does in like in something like An Enemy of the People, or Hedda Gabler, or Strindberg does in The Father. Like it's very, very intensely dramatic, but it's completely real. Um, I mean, in a certain sense, there's an exaggeration there, but it's things that are like, yes, this is just an essentialization, though. This is authentic, though, on a fundamental level.
Going back just a little bit, I think of Balzac as being the closest writer in fiction to music, because I'm following the pacing like I'm following the emotional intensity of a symphony more than I am always following what a character does that day. It just seems like his writing is always going in these intensity shapes that are very musical to me.
Huh. Well,
Like the climax is a true climax. It's
yeah, yeah. Structurally, I can sort of see what you're meaning there. I guess. Well, for me, like I think, this is an interesting sort of thing to think about. The analogy of music and literature. When I think of that, the first two writers that come to mind are Flaubert and Beckett. Um,
okay.
just like when I'm reading Flaubert, it just every word feels like the exact right word. Um, in the way that music does, of like that's the exact right note you need there.
Okay.
And with Beckett, I just find that feeling of just every instant is interesting in the way that so much atonal music is.
Yeah.
Where it's like there's just not, with a lot of more, common practice era music, there are sort of duller passages that occur. There are passages that are, incredible, but I feel like there's a little more passage writing. You'll find while in atonal music, there's more of a feeling like no, every instant is just has to grab you. That's the only thing it's got going. It doesn't have a structure to repel you. It's just, when you're listening to Xenakis' Persepolis, it's like you need to have every instant be jam packed with interest, and like Beckett manages that in a marvelous kind of way.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's interesting. So our metaphor winds up in two different places, but I can actually see your side. I can see it, and also Persepolis is a sublime.
It's
I'm
fucking amazing.
yeah. I'm really glad you're on a Xenakis change because, like, you listen to Xenakis and you're immediately a smarter person. I mean, that's such a stuffy way of saying
Yeah,
it, but
no, no, it's right. It's
there's
right.
all these sounds out there in the world. Yeah, it's. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, I
he's
mean, like
really one of the best.
my first reaction to Persepolis was, I really hope this is what hell is like. Um,
Ah,
yeah. But
I
anyway.
mean, that's also a very epic and dramatic, like narratively work too. I mean that
Oh yeah,
the
yeah. Like there's a structure there. There's a structure there. But like I just find that with a lot of atonal music, it just hits me in a way that's like, okay, this is every half second is interesting in a way that little else in human life is.
like the opposite would be in music, like Schubert. So Schubert would have these like 20-minute long first movements to his piano sonatas, and in the standard form, you have like an exposition area, you have a development section, and you have a recapitulation where the opening material comes back, like ABA roughly, but much more complicated. And when the sonata was 4 minutes, you'd have a repeat of the exposition, and that would just be like a repeat of the first minute to 2 minutes. But for Schubert, that's a repeat of the first 4 to 6 minutes. And and you so you're like, and now we're going to go on to the development, which is where the drama often, a lot of the drama takes place, and you're like, oh, we have to hear all that again, and you're like, but I already got it. I don't need to hear all that again. And it's sort of it's kind of a funny thing when you go to a live concert and they're doing Schubert. There's a little bit for the people in the know. They're hearing, they know the piece, they're getting to the point. There's a little bit of a, oh god, like there's a moment where it's like, oh, we're gonna repeat that all again. Because certain pianists just don't take those repeats because they're exhausting,
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
mean, they're boring. I'll just say it that way. So,
yeah, yeah.
but
That's
yeah, I'm just steel manning your point there about Schubert. So,
yeah,
or
and even even Dostoevsky, who I don't know, everything he's doing is great, but there are just some times where even though like things are moving forward, it does feel a little bit like we're not. It's not as rich as some of these other parts here, buddy. Um,
yeah.
but anyway, and then getting back to Balzac, um, yeah, I feel like there's something more to say. Like just for you, like what's like the major trauma of this work of art of this
Oh,
story?
I think for me, so there's a moment of only positive sublimeness, which is when the image of the at the climax comes into being. I thought that was pretty. I mean, I'm just gonna say sublime. I know it's a rather cliched word for unbridled romanticism, but I thought that part really blew me away. And on the second read, even more so. And he often does that where he'll climax in a short story into an image. And he's very careful about what that image is going to be because it's the image that is going to sustain the climactic moment of the work. So, you know, in Gobsec, it's a room full of garbage. And it's it's different in a lot of the works, but it's a theme of Balzac to climax into this sublime image. So that one got me on the level of just inspiration, where it's like, oh, what would a musical equivalent be of reaching such a high intensity and following through without letting anyone down? Um, but the moment of trauma for me is Frenhofer losing the plot. I feel a little weird that artists identified with him. Um, like I don't know, like I think it's the danger in a certain sense. The danger, there's so many dangers and pitfalls in art, and to see someone, it's almost like Balzac went, what would be what's the biggest pitfall that the biggest artist could fall into, and executed that very well, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, the over exuberance.
So that fear comes in for me when I read that, like, well, how am I misstepping now?
Yeah, yeah, it's. I'm just trying to think of anything for
Yeah, how
me.
about for you? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I'm actually just first directing at your point. Like, is there anything that's like that for me, where I just feel like, oh, overstepping? I'm not sure, but for me, the big trauma, like the thing that's stick with me, is actually just that initial description of Frenhofer. I just really liked seeing him. I liked that sense of this is very colorful, intense personage coming down. And like the first sort of like he comes in, he starts criticizing um, in this very forthright fashion. I liked that. It just feels like color, a human being with color. That's great. That's great. In a way that is a little bit. I feel like it was a little bit foreign to me with a lot of the literature that I read. Of this is not a character you see in Chekhov. This is not a character in Seggers. Um,
No, it's not a character I think you see because, in part, you know, Balzac slaves away at his writing, writes himself to death, as Nietzsche says. And so the idea of monomania as a grounding theme, and I don't like the clinical sound of monomania because it sounds like I'm diagnosing these people. So I want a better phrase, but sort of that when the drive takes over, um, I think that's also where I connect it to music, because music doesn't have an object, so to speak, and so you just have pure drives and intensities and emotions. And I think for me, reading Balzac, to go onto what you're saying, is that like there's a sense that these passages are jumping off the page. That I'm not reading a novel, that I'm getting like attacked or something, or I don't know. So it's so alive.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that
that's almost what's disturbing about it. Is
yeah,
it's so alive.
just the buoyancy of it. And I guess that's actually I think actually this part of the reason why this that description of Frenhofer just meant so much to me was I'm reading Ulysses right now very slowly, and the kind of world that Joyce creates is one of sort of this either a sensitive or intelligent person who's kind of mouseish, kind of uh, quiet and in the corner, not self-assertive at all, surrounded by thick, oppressive vulgarity. Um, and like that's the kind of image he has of life, and I like that image. I think Joyce does a fabulous job with it, and I find that relatable in certain ways. Um, but when you read and they see being oppressed by stupidity and complacence in that sort of sense, and seeing in Balzac like, no, no, vitality, intelligence, that's oppressive. Like that's the thing that's like pushing itself out. That's like punching in all directions around itself. That's the thing that's significant. Is like, oh, oh, I can breathe again. Thank God. So like that's why I liked Frenhofer in a big way. Uh,
Yeah. There's a great song by a writer and experimental musician called Jenny Haval. She wrote a song called "Is There Anything on Me That Doesn't Speak?" And I get this sense of these characters in Balzac's head exploding out, like I don't know. And this is probably taking it
no,
too
that's
far.
no, that's that no that is literally that image that you have there is exactly what Auguste Rodin did in his famous sculpture of Balzac. It's this image of Balzac, in his night shirt, whatever it is, sort of looking up in this moment of ecstasy almost of conceiving another world of characters and their interrelations. Um, and
It's
it's
also
like,
like in a positive way, very gay. In a
don't
good
give me
way.
that, don't give me that. But
Balzac is like the most flamboyant man in the world.
yes, yes, yes. No, no,
But I see it. I'm looking at it now. It's actually wow. It's fantastic.
yeah, yeah, and there's lots of copies throughout the United States, at least. Um, but it's a great, but like that image is like, well, I mean, like yeah, like they're exploding out of his head as what is it? Forgetting the names of all of them now, but yeah, exploding out of his head as. I'm dying here. Who came out of Zeus's head fully grown?
Athena. Athena.
Hina, of course. And that's what's going on, and
I
that's
was just gonna I was gonna start throwing random people at you like Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer came.
fuck you. That's
Jerry, and then he like emerges from Zeus's head.
oh god. That's disgusting. Um, okay,
Oh,
so
R.I.P. You can't desecrate. He just died. We can't be rude to him.
no, it's the world's a better place. Let's be
Well,
unambiguous.
there is a little Jerry in Balzac.
Yeah, I can see
Uh,
what you mean.
but I think that there's what I'm not glorifying just like the pulp novel. What I'm saying is that he learned from,
Yeah,
or that's his homeland, so to speak, that he emerges from to create this. So, well, I don't know. I really loved reading it again. I think this is one of these pieces. I think Balzac's one of those writers where no matter how many faults I will admit he has, he is a little untouchable in my heart.
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm in a similar situation of there are issues here, but who cares? It's just so flamboyant. It's so alive. It's so present. It's so earnest. It's earnest.
Yeah.
Um, and that's really, like a few artists are like that. Few artists are like that. So uh, anyway, I think that does it for for the unknown masterpiece.
Yes, and I got the plays, so I am ready for next week.
So next week we'll be doing Maeterlinck, um, who once upon a time got the Nobel Prize in Literature for whatever that's worth. So, um,
Cool.
well, he's basically forgotten today. So,
No,
yeah.
no, no, you're totally wrong. I know what something from my field before we go. Maeterlinck is forever enshrined in the annals of the music of his in the history of music because his Peleus at Melisande was let me see, Sibelius did it. Who I mean, everyone was it. It was Debussy. I mean, literally everyone and their mom has a. It's like Romeo and Juliet. It's like who if no one ever stages Romeo and Juliet again, it doesn't matter because of all the freaking music that's attached to it.
Okay. Well, all right. I'm glad for that at least. But all right. So next week will be fun.
All
Um,
right,
all right. So bye everybody. Bye Chris.
bye, Ray. Thanks.